Oh, McQueen. Crazy McQueen. McQueen and I got along pretty good. McQueen looked at me kind of like an older brother.
James McQueen, you crazy nut. The two of us got along pretty well. McQueen looked at me like I was his brother. People loved James Garner, who played the lead role in Maverick and the Rockford Files. He was honest, funny, and charming, but he kept one story secret for many years. His work on The Great Escape was more than just a big step forward in movies. It was the scene of a bad fight with Steve McQueen, who is one of the most mysterious stars in Hollywood. Now, a long time after Garner's death, his honest comments about McQueen have come to light, showing a side of their friendship that few people could have imagined. What did Garner take with him when he died? Finally, the truth is out, but before we talk about these shocking new details, it's important to look back at the early events that linked James Garner and Steve McQueen. James Garner's fights that were never told. He was more than just a Hollywood star, James Garner. He dealt with huge problems and overcame them to become one of the most beloved artists of his time. He was known for having a natural charm that brought characters to life, like the sneaky gambler Brett Maverick and the calm Jim Rockford. He left a lasting mark on both TV and movies. For Garner, his early years were not easy at all. He was born James Scott Bum Garner on April 7, 1928 in Denver, Oklahoma. He lost his mother when he was 5 years old, during a sad abortion gone wrong. He grew up during the Great Depression. Weldon Bum Garner, Garner's father, ran a hardware shop but had a hard time taking care of him and his two older brothers after his wife died. They lost their family hardware shop in a fire, and Weldon turned to drinking. The effects were terrible. The boys Garner were ignored and abused, and they were often made to sing for their food and were punished if they didn't. Weldon eventually got married again, but the boys' pain got worse. Garner said that his stepmother Wilma was mean, and he told stories about how she hit him with tree branches and put him in women's clothes to make him feel bad. Garner could not take it any longer when he was 14. When there was a fight, he fought back and beat Wilma up to protect himself. At that point, his father stepped in and stopped things from getting worse, but the damage had already been done. In the end, Garner said that he might have done too much if his father hadn't stopped him. Not long after that, Weldon completely left the family, leaving James and his brothers to take care of themselves. Even though Garner had a rough childhood, his strength helped him get through it. He did a lot of different weird jobs. For a short time he was in the Merchant Navy, but he had to quit because he was always getting seasick. He even worked as an underwear model for a while, which is a funny side note to the life of a man who was meant to be a Hollywood star. Garner joined the U.S. Army in 1950. He was in the Army and sent to Korea with the 24th Division's 5th Regimental Combat Team. He had a hard time in the Korean War. He was hurt by shrapnel from a rocket attack just 2 days after he got there, and he was hurt again months later, this time by friendly fire. He was given 2 Purple Hearts for these injuries, but Garner rarely talked about his service and tried to play down his bravery. One interesting but less well-known fact about Garner's life is that he got a strong dislike of garlic while he was in the military. This awareness helped him stay alive in a way no one expected. One time his unit's meal was accidentally poisoned, but Garner didn't eat it because it had garlic in it. Also, Garner's quick reflexes saved lives. While on guard duty one cold night, he got a faint whiff of garlic in the air. He knew they were close because he knew that enemy troops often ate a lot of garlic. He told his unit, and they were able to surprise the enemy, which probably stopped a deadly attack. Garner did a variety of odd jobs after coming home from the war. He worked as a gas station attendant and even laid rugs with his father. Paul Gregory, a guy who saw something special in him, came across him one day. Gregory pushed Garner to try acting and would go on to become a talent agent. At first, Garner turned down Gregory's idea, but when he saw Gregory's name on an agency sign years later, he chose to get back in touch, and that chance meeting was the start of his work as an actor. Gregory got Garner his first part in the Caine Mutiny Court-Martial, where he played a court member who didn't speak. For even though the job was small, it led to bigger chances. The next movie Garner was in was Sayonara with Marlon Brando, but his big break came in 1957, when he was cast as Brett Maverick in the Western series Maverick. There was no guarantee that the show would be a hit. There was a lot of question that it could compete with shows like The Ed Sullivan Show and The Steve Allen Show. But Garner brought something special to the part with his natural charm and quick wit. Within 2 years, Maverick was a huge hit, making Garner a household name and showing Hollywood that no one else could match his ability. There were other reasons why Garner quit the show besides his increased fame. The reason James Garner quit Maverick. James Garner quickly became the heart and soul of Maverick. As Brett Maverick, he charmed people with his sly wit and natural charm. Garner's career was taking off after the show became a huge hit, but in 1960, a writer's strike shut down Hollywood. This led to a dramatic fight between Garner and the company that would change his career in the end. Because of the strike, Maverick could no longer make anything. If there were no scripts, there would be no new shows, and Warner Brothers thought that Garner would have no work. Even though he was becoming more famous, he was only making $1,250 a week. When the company suddenly fired him because they didn't have any scripts, Garner felt betrayed. He felt a fire inside him that made him want to stand up against the studio's unfair tactics. Garner sued Warner Brothers for breach of contract because she felt underpaid and mistreated. This was a bold move that shocked Hollywood. But Garner was used to taking risks with big prizes, both on and off the screen. He had a strong case, and in the end he won the claim. It was clear from the win that he was ready to fight for what he thought was right. Warner Brothers tried to make things right by giving Garner a raise and a new deal, but it was too late. Garner had lost faith in the studio system, and saw himself as a puppet that execs could move around as they pleased. He made the brave choice to leave Maverick, because he wanted to take charge of his business. Warner Brothers wasn't ready to let go of Maverick, even though it had lost its star. The show stayed popular, and Jack Kelly, who played Bart Maverick, stayed. But Kelly's role wasn't as interesting as Garner's, so the studio looked for someone who looked a lot like Garner to play the part. Robert Colbert, an actor who wasn't very well known but looked a lot like Garner, walked in. Warner Brothers put him in the same clothes and taught him how to act like Garner, giving him the new name Brent Maverick for his role. He joked that he'd rather play a woman named Brenda than be a copy of James Garner because he didn't like the plan. The company also made another Maverick movie called Bo Maverick. A young Roger Moore, who would later play James Bond, played the part of Bo Maverick. It was a good idea to have more than one Maverick cousin, but the show missed a great chance by keeping the characters in different plots. This piecemeal method hurt the show, and in the end both Moore and Colbert quit. Jack Kelly will have to run the show by himself in its last season. The studios had a different plan for Bo Maverick at first. They wanted the figure to have a British accent, and know a lot about the world. They asked young star Sean Connery to play this part. Connery flew to Hollywood to talk about the part, but he turned it down because he wanted to focus on bigger chances, like the James Bond franchise, which would make him famous in movie history. Bo Maverick was played by Roger Moore, who had been in the Alaskans. It's interesting that the Alaskans also had problems during the writers' strike, which is why Warner Brothers used old Maverick plots for the show. People did notice this cost-cutting move. Moore himself saw that the stories were being used over and over again, and the show was cancelled after only 37 episodes. Even though Garner's leaving meant the end of an era for Maverick, he wasn't done with the role. Maverick was turned into a movie in 1994 by Richard Donner. Mel Gibson played Brett Maverick in the movie. The movie was true to the original series. It had both action and humor, and Gibson channeled Garner's charm. James Garner was cast as Marshal Zane Cooper, which was a good choice, because the part would become more important by the end of the movie. Garner's appearance added a sense of continuity and nostalgia, making the link between the movie and its TV roots stronger. Paul Newman was originally in the running for the part of Zane Cooper, but when he turned it down, the part went to Garner, which is a poetic twist given his ties to the Maverick heritage. The 1994 movie Maverick did well at the box office and with critics. Critics and fans alike praised Garner's smooth return to the series, and loved how he brought the Maverick world back to life. On the other hand, Garner's big break came with his part in The Great Escape. But behind the scenes of that famous movie, there was a fierce competition that changed the way it was made forever. Why The Great Escape was made. Since he did well in Maverick, James Garner took on a new task with The Great Escape 1963, a war drama. Based on a real story, the movie told the story of a daring prison break by Allied prisoners of war during World War II. It was directed by John Sturges, and was a turning point in Garner's career, showing off his ability to play a brave and clever person. He became more famous and joined the ranks of Hollywood greats like Steve McQueen, whose part in the movie would become one of his most famous. The story takes place in a German prisoner of war camp where American, British, and Australian prisoners are closely watched. The prisoners work together under the direction of Big X, played by Richard Attenborough, to try to get away. Each prisoner helps with the plan in a different way. Henley, played by Garner, and known as the Scrounger, tricks his way into getting the things he needs for the escape. At the same time, McQueen's rebellious Cooler King captivates audiences, and Charles Bronson's Tunnel King battles desperately to dig the escape tunnels. The group is still going strong even though they've had a lot of hurdles, like finding a tunnel. Together their drive leads to one of the bravest attempts at escape ever shown on TV or in movies. But the harsh facts of war make their victory seem less important. The Gestapo is after many of the prisoners, and most of the people who flee end up in terrible situations. The movie will always have a place in movie history because of its gripping plot and memorable characters. The Great Escape was loosely based on Paul Brickhill's real story, but the script was written to show off the acting skills of the whole cast. The result was a movie that people all over the world could relate to, because it was full of tension, friendship, and unwavering hope. On the set, Steve McQueen, who was still becoming a big star in Hollywood, was eager to make an impression that would last. Because Garner's Scrounger was so charming and clever, McQueen pushed for more screen time, which made his rivalry with Garner clear, a part that often got the attention. McQueen and the director John Sturges became more angry with each other as McQueen asked for changes that would make his character stand out more. But McQueen's performance, especially the now iconic motorbike chase scene, showed that he didn't need more screen time to shine. The film's strength was its large group of actors. Garner's charm, Attenborough's ability to lead, and Bronson's toughness. The story made me feel things, and James Coburn's dry wit added to that. When the movie came out in 1963, it got mixed reviews from critics. Some people, like Bosley Crowther of the New York Times, thought the movie was too automatic and lacked emotional depth. Others, like Time magazine, said it did a great job of showing how realistically the German setting was shown, how well the story was told, and how well the actors were cast. Even though it got mixed reviews, The Great Escape became a timeless classic, loved by audiences, and praised for its exciting tale of bravery and sacrifice. The question is, what did James Garner really think of Steve McQueen's behavior on the set? The long silence about Steve McQueen is finally broken by James Garner. Hollywood has always been a place with a lot of glitz, glitter, and drama, through the golden age of movies, and up to now. Fans have been fascinated by rivalries and feuds between stars, which have made for many news stories. These fights, which are often caused by jealousy, pride, and competition, often show the human side of people with larger-than-life personalities. Even though James Garner was known for being charming, laid-back, and professional, he wasn't always safe from Hollywood feuds. His relationships with his co-workers were mostly good, but his feelings towards Steve McQueen were much less friendly. Even though they worked together on the famous movie The Great Escape, they had a tense relationship because their characters didn't get along. During shooting, they seemed friendly at first, but McQueen's distant and sometimes strange behavior put some space between them. Since McQueen liked being alone, he stayed in a private lodge and drove himself to work in a Rolls-Royce, which made things even more different. Garner, who has always been honest, later wrote about his feelings about McQueen in his 2011 autobiography, The Garner Files. He said that McQueen was a pain in the ass, and compared his behavior to how unpredictable Marlon Brando was. Garner went even further and said that McQueen was more of a movie star than a real actor because he relied on a carefully crafted image rather than depth and variety. He thought that this way of doing things limited McQueen's abilities as an actor. Garner wasn't just upset about McQueen's playing, he was also upset about how he behaved on the set, which included temper fits and causing trouble. When things got so bad at one point, director John Sturges thought about changing the focus of the movie so that Garner, not McQueen, would be the main character. Even though he was pleased, Garner turned down the offer because he knew that such a big change would cause chaos. Instead, he talked to McQueen directly and found out that McQueen didn't like his character because he thought it lacked excitement and courage. It is said that Sturges added motorbike stunts and changed the character to make them more interesting, which many people think helped McQueen. Still, Garner thought McQueen's requests were pointless and selfish, which made him remember how difficult his co-star was. In the Garner files, Garner told very private and honest stories about his work and relationships, giving a raw look into his Hollywood life. Along with his thoughts on McQueen, he said that movie mogul Jack Warner was one of the rudest people he had ever met, and criticized Charlton Heston for how stiffly he acted, but it was his friendship with McQueen that really got people's attention. Garner said that McQueen was insecure, could get jealous easily, and was sometimes hard to deal with. Garner even said that McQueen's wife, Nyla, had told him that her husband was having problems with insecurity and false claims of cheating. In spite of this, Garner insisted that McQueen wasn't naturally bad, but rather a truly insecure person whose fears shaped his behavior. The way Garner saw it, he was like an older brother to McQueen, but McQueen's insecurities would sometimes make their friendship rough. In one case, McQueen wrongly said that Garner was cheating on Nyla, which Garner denied and said was just McQueen's worry showing. The book also shows how Garner interacted with Charles Bronson, who played another great escape in the movie. Garner's time with Bronson was much less pleasant. He said Bronson was angry and unhappy, and told a story about an awkward situation that happened at his house during a poker game. Bronson refused to honor a bet, and tried to keep a struggling Hollywood extra from getting their winnings. Garner made Bronson pay because he was always willing to do what he thought was right, which led to a heated fight that almost got physical. Even though the instant tension was gone, the two still didn't get along. When the two men ran into each other by chance at a restaurant years later, they still couldn't let go of their old grudges. Both actors admitted that they were still angry with each other, which is a warning that some fights in Hollywood leave scars that never fully heal. In the Garner files, Garner wasn't afraid to show the complicated side of himself that was hidden beneath his smooth, all-American exterior. People loved Garner's friendly, down-to-earth charm, but he also talked about the darker parts of his life. One of the most shocking things that came out was that he had tried drugs like MJ and white stuff. He even talked about a memorable time when he did lines with the late comedian John Belushi, which showed a more wild side of his otherwise serious personality. Garner's political views, which were a big part of who he was, were also talked about in his book. Garner was a proud liberal who looked up to people like Adlai Stevenson and Barack Obama. His beliefs often affected the parts he chose and how he went about his career. When Garner thought about all of his movies, The Notebook and the Americanization of Emily stood out as his favorites. He thought they were the best of his career. He was especially happy that people were starting to like how Emily was becoming more like Americans, which became a cult favorite over the years, even though it wasn't well received when it first came out. Even though Garner liked movies like Murphy's Romance and Grand Prix, he was surprisingly honest about the rest of his work. He wasn't afraid to say that many of his movies were at best average, and at worst, as he put it, terrible. On the other hand, Garner's most famous part in the Rockford Files came with its own set of problems, both on and off the screen. The hard times that led to Rockford's progress. Roy Huggins, who made the first Maverick series, had an idea in the mid-1970s to update one of his most famous works. Huggins worked on the Rockford Files with Stephen J. Cannell. It was a modern police show that was based on Maverick's charm and wit. At its heart was Jim Rockford, a private detective played by the charming James Garner. Garner, who was already famous for his part in Maverick, got a chance to shine again as Rockford. His performance won him an Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor very quickly. When it first aired in 1974, The Rockford Files quickly became a beloved TV classic. It took viewers into the seedy side of Los Angeles, where Jim Rockford solved crimes from his simple mobile home. Rockford was not like most action heroes. He wasn't perfect like the heroes of the time. He had flaws, was often having bad luck, and was very easy to relate to. People liked Rockford because he was likable. He lived in a trailer on the beach, wore rumpled clothes, and relied on his wit as much as his skill. The show was even more charming because Garner was so committed to being real. He insisted on doing many of his stunts himself, like the high-speed car chases that became a trademark of the show. Garner's love of cars came from working on the 1966 race movie Grand Prix, which was found in the Rockford Files. Jim's famous gold Pontiac Firebird became famous along with him. As much as they tried to be realistic, it cost them a lot.
Over time, the move started to hurt Garner's body, especially his knees and back. By the 6th season, doctors told him to ease up on the physical demands of the part. This advice came at the same time that the show ended in 1980. Garner's health wasn't the only reason why the Rockford Files were closed. The show was known for having very high production costs because it had a lot of action scenes, expensive location shoots, and the Pontiac Firebird kept getting damaged. The car needed to be fixed and replaced on a regular basis because it was often damaged during stunts. Even small things, like Jim Rockford's unique license plate number 853 OKG, added to the production's high costs and careful attention to detail. Costs went up even more because of guest stars, who played bigger roles as the seasons went on. Even though there were problems, the show did well because of how well it was written, and how creative it was. The best part of every episode was Rockford's answering machine message, which became a signature of the show, and was often very smart and funny. As the show went on, it got harder for the writers to come up with new and creative ideas. So that things would always be interesting, the production team let everyone in the NBC building submit ideas. Behind the scenes, the Rockford Files helped new actors get their start. David Chase, who later created The Sopranos, was on the writing staff. The show's theme music, which was written by Mike Post, also became famous and cemented Post's status as one of the best composers for TV. The Rockford Files was a critical and commercial hit, but it wasn't easy to make. Garner was hurt physically, and the costs kept going up. Because Universal Studios owed Garner money for royalties, they got into a long legal war that lasted 8 years. But in the end, Garner won and got a big settlement, though the exact number was never made public. Even with these problems, Garner stayed dedicated to the Rockford Files, even after the original series ended. Fans were very happy that he played Jim Rockford again in 6 made-for-TV movies in the 1990s. But during this time, Garner had emotional and physical problems, including major heart surgery, that showed how much his long career had hurt him. There were also efforts at spin-offs and reboots of the show, but they never quite captured the magic of the original. In 1977, NBC tried to make a spin-off show called Gabby and Gandhi, which would have starred Isaac Hayes and Louis Gossett Jr. as a dynamic police pair. A sneak peek for the show, which ran as an episode of the Rockford Files, called Just Another Polish Wedding, didn't get enough attention, so the project was put on hold. Richie Brockelman, played by Dennis Dugan, was the focus of another try at a spin-off. The character first appeared in the TV movie Richie Brockelman, The Missing 24 Hours, and then in the Rockford Files. However, his own show, Richie Brockelman, Private Eye, only had 6 episodes. Fans of the Rockford Files were thrilled to learn that there were plans for a new season in 2010. Dermot Mulroney, who is known for his work in Roma, was one of the producers on the project. Other producers included Steve Carell and David Shore, who is best known for Making House. Alan Tudyk and Beau Bridges were cast in supporting parts, which made people even more excited about the reboot. That being said, the pilot didn't capture the spirit of the original show. Some critics said that Michael Watkins' direction was lackluster, and that Mulroney's performance as Rockford was underwhelming. Dawn Purose is well known for her work on Prison Break. Her attempts to save the pilot through extensive re-editing weren't enough to persuade NBC executives. The reboot was eventually shelved, which made fans sad, but still gave them hope for a successful return in the future. But James Garner had problems that were very different from what people saw when they saw Jim Rockford's easy charm and confidence. The problems James Garner hid from everyone showed that he was more than just a great actor. He was a beloved Hollywood star. Fans fell in love with him because of how he played characters like Brett Maverick and Jim Rockford. He did this by being funny, warm and real. In real life, he was respected for both how skilled he was and how long he stayed married to Lois Clark, which is not common in Hollywood. Unlike many of his friends, Garner had stable, loving relationships throughout his life. This shows how grounded he was. It was said that James Garner had a lot of health problems later in life. A number of problems, including a stroke that left him unable to work, slowly slowed down his once active career. Because he worked so hard at his stunts, especially when he was on the Rockford Files, he hurt himself a lot and had to have multiple surgeries on his back and knees. Over time, these physical demands got harder, and he had to slow down from the fast pace he had in his prime years. Garner was honest about how his accidents had affected him in many ways, saying that one health problem often led to another. He had heart surgery in 1988, had chronic sinus infections, and is still dealing with the effects of a stroke from 2008. Even with these setbacks, Garner dealt with his health problems with the same toughness that made his characters on screen. In real life, he was also tough, as shown by a scary road rage event he talked about in an interview in 1981. An angry driver struck him through the window of his car after a small accident. The argument got worse. Garner got broken bones and a concussion after being hit several times while he was on the ground. Despite this, he stood his ground, which was very brave in a scary situation. In his later years, Garner had to deal with the physical problems that came with getting older on the set of Space Cowboys, where he worked with Clint Eastwood, Donald Sutherland, and Tommy Lee Jones to play a group of retired pilots who were called back into duty. The older actors had a hard time with the part, and accidents happened a lot. Garner dislocated his shoulder while shooting with Eastwood. Eastwood, who has had shoulder injuries before, stepped in to help, but Garner didn't seem to care about what happened, saying it was just a stupid mistake and not a sign of how old he was. The most memorable show of weakness in the movie, though, wasn't physical, it was funny. In one scene, all four actors show their behinds to the camera, which is a funny way to show that even Hollywood stars can't escape the passing of time. After his stroke in 2008, James Garner's health kept getting worse. He died on July 19, 2014, at the age of 86. A heart attack was found to be the cause of death. Thanks for seeing it. Please like, subscribe, share, and turn on post notifications if you liked it so you can see our newest posts.